Okay, let's go over the presentation for this week. I'm not going to go over every and each detail. In general, we're starting a journey of about 2 years and hopefully only 2 years, although some of you have a plan for 3 years. Um, and this course is supposed to develop two major contents or fields of contents at the same time. One is your research ability, and will definitely hold your hand and walk you through the process of conducting research here at the University of Mary. And the second one is what we called professional distinction, which has many sub contents and fields and abilities to it. So you can see in the purpose of the course is to introduce you to research. Some of you have already conducted research and are even publishing. Um, Explain the importance of research to professional distinction, explain of the process itself here at UMary step after step, and I'll definitely emphasize that the more information you get now, the more you know, and you're not walking, blind through the process. We're going to develop your portfolio, your CVs and resumes. There's a difference between CVs and resumes, and we're going to go over them. But notice that the syllabus also allows you to, slowly get into that. We will need to do anything that is in regards to your research as fast as possible. Remember that. Don't delay anything if you can, not to delay regarding your research. That's very, very important. Do not lose time, and we'll do the same. Um, we want to develop your scholarship abilities, and we want to develop your job seeking skills, because with all due respect, when you leave here, you need to find a job, you need to pay debts, you need to have mom and dad off your back, and maybe even a fiance by now. Congrats to Kayla Cummings for her engagement. You're all entitled to make mistakes. Hey, we don't judge, So yeah, you need to start life, and we want you to be ahead of others when that happens. We'll do anything possible for that. All right, so you're advised to read the presentation and communicate any questions that you may have, and you'll hear this like 1,000 times. You're welcome to watch these videos, and if there's a book for a certain week or course, you definitely want to read the assigned chapters. All right, so let's talk about the purpose of research. Number one, to investigate research questions, meaning that there are questions in your field, in the world, whatever interests you, and you do not know the answer. So you want to find an answer. We want to add to the body of knowledge that exists and promote the knowledge and the field, right? It might lead to an invention, it might lead to an improvement of an existing tool. For instance, we developed a awesome and really good exercise test protocol, both submaximal and maximal. You'll get to know it in lab week, called the NDKS UMary protocol, and we're offering it to the world. We think it's a great protocol that has its advantages and a certain twist to it. And as of the last 2 years, anyone that used it, professionals and subjects, just loved it. Research gives you the frame, a process, structure to how to validate or contradict hypotheses. You say, hey, I don't think a human has two hands. Prove it. But you just can't, shout it out. You have to prove it. You have to back up what you're saying, and there's a way to do it. Advantages. a well-defined process with rules established for many years. It's statistically proven and analyzed. It induces academic discussion, meaning you don't have to agree with every article that you encounter. You can have critique, and you can definitely have your voice heard, right? The most important part that we want you to be leaders, influence the world, put a dent in the world, uh, develop your critical thinking, and have your voice heard. Um, and also, it prevents random conclusions and practice in different fields. It promotes continued thought, which I think is important. Never shut down your brain. It promotes science. It promotes excellence. And it nurtures the field with information, and the field nurtures research. It's a cycle, and it should never be broken. Research does has its disadvantages. It's usually expensive. Um, it usually takes a certain sample size, which is not the whole population, right? You don't see studies with 7 billion people in them. And then you conclude to the whole population. That is, of course, risky, and there's always errors. It can be subjective. It might be theoretical only. Not always do you have implications to the knowledge. It may be inaccurate. Mistakes can come from statistical analysis, from data collection, from the equipment used, to the user, to the researcher. It can originate from the subjects. There's a lot of controlling and minimizing mistakes to be made when you're conducting research. When you are publishing your work, you are now dependent on other people thinking that your work is even important, and it might be important and they don't get it, or they don't want to publish your work, or they're trying to change the way that you're trying to say what you're saying. It can be aggravating. It can take up to 2 years sometimes to publish an article. Again and again, submitting and resubmitting, changing the journal, dealing with criticism, which is not always easy. And sometimes you have an idea and you don't have the tools. So you might be ahead of time, or your field, and the actual tools do not exist yet. Alright, why do we want to advertise our work? A, it makes you immortal. Did you think about that? What happens the day after you die and your Facebook account is dead? Or Twitter? That's it? Is that the end of you? No. No, it's not. When you publish your work, you're expressing an opinion. You are advocating for the field. You are making people think. You are making them better. You're making yourself better. And it's always going to be there. So you're contributing to the world. You're taking on the world, and you're saying, hey, I have something to say. And this is important, and I want you to read this. And I had a question. I found an answer, and you either contradict your hypothesis or not. When you are publishing, you are being reviewed by people like me. I actually review for quite a lot of journals. I get about 2 or 3 articles per week to review. I'm also the editor-in-chief of a journal, meaning that I lead a journal and decide what's it about and what is going to be published and the quality of work, and it's tons of work, but I feel that I'm contributing and affecting someone's life. And of course, I try to do it with the utmost respect and professionalism. But you're being reviewed by others, and that's kind of a mark of quality. You're not doing whatever you want. You're not saying whatever you think you can. Let's see. All right, so we keep talking about that. All right, let's dive into the process itself. Once again, I'll say anything that comes to mind, but you need to produce questions if you have. The process starts with choosing the path that you want to go down through. And you have three options. The first option is a full thesis with a thesis defense. The second option is a research project where you are conducting your own research, meaning that your topic is only yours. And the third option is a research project but done as a group, meaning that you have other students within your cohort that are actually doing the same research like you are, exactly the same research as you are. Those are the three options, and we'll go over them in detail. We recommend having a thesis. It's higher quality, it's more work, a bit more stressful, and I understand that it's easy to take the shortcut, but it says a lot about you, and you never know when it's going to come back, and then you're going to need a thesis, and you're not going to start all over again, right? Most people don't. So it's advised to have a thesis. It's not necessary to be successful or be a clinician, but I think it's a good idea. Most students that choose the thesis are those who wish to continue to doctorate degrees. We are hoping and doing everything possible to be able to offer a doctorate in clinical exercise physiology, which is based on the credits that you are taking right now. So those would be subtracted from the future credits in the doctorate in 2019, which can be a very good choice for you guys and ladies, of course. If you see yourself in higher education, you definitely want to have a thesis. You'll see out there in the field that there's a Master's of Arts and then a Master's of Science. Usually a Master of Science is given to whoever has a thesis, and a Master's of Arts is given to whoever does not have a thesis. We give the Masters of Science to both. We're not going to deal with that. When we're talking about a thesis, we're talking about doing the work, only that you constantly have one more factor following and accompanying your work, and that's the Thesis Defense Committee. The Thesis Defense Committee has a few more people in it, 3 people to be exact, and I would like to explain the differences between the roles so it'd be clear in the handbook. First of all, you have a research mentor. A research mentor has to be someone with a doctorate degree in a related field and has to have or had conducted research in the past. This mentor, if he or she, are not faculty at the University of Mary, they have to be approved by me, by the program director. This person develops the topic, the design, the IRB proposal, everything goes through this person, and this person also mentors you in your data collection, in your writing chapters, dissertation, and is part of your defense committee if you are going down the thesis route. Then you have the committee chairperson. The committee chairperson is not your research mentor. The committee chairperson has to be completely objective, and while everyone on the committee have to have your best interest at heart, they also have to make sure that policies are honored. And the committee chairperson is running the show in regards to policies. The committee chair also communicates everything to the committee members. So right now you have a committee chair that does not have to have a doctorate necessarily, and you have your research mentor that is one of the members of the committee, and another person that has at least a master's degree in our field. Those are the three people, and everything has to be sent out to them. They have to authorize your prospectus. Only when all of their remarks are addressed, then you submit an IRB proposal. And when the IRB proposal is approved, then you start working. The chapters that you write with your research mentor are sent to the other two committee members, and they have to decide that it's defendable. They have to say, before we put, Moran to the test, have him defend his ideas, this is good enough to be defended. And they'll also give you advice and remarks to improve your chances of passing the defense. The defense is about an hour and 15 sometimes. You present for 15 minutes without any questions from the committee or the audience. Then you have 45 minutes, 15 minutes with each of the committee members to prove that A, you know what you've done, and you can defend your decisions and outcomes. The 15 minutes with each include the time that you have to answer. And then there's about 15 minutes with the audience that they can ask questions. You get the results immediately, but between those 45 minutes that you're going back and forth with the committee members and the 15 minutes with the audience, there's about 5 or 10 minutes that the committee members decide if you've passed or not. Obviously, if you have only one member on your side, you've failed, or you need to re-defend. If you have two, you've passed. If you have three, you've passed. If you have all three, write down that you've defended with honors, then that will go on your, you'll get a letter that you have defended with honors, which is obviously the highest level possible, but all three members have to agree to that. If two members out of three agree that you've defended with honors, but one did not, you will not receive that distinction. Obviously, the work is you submitting something and being revised from your prospectus to the IRB to your chapters. The faster you get the remarks done, the better you are off. And I'll tell you right here and right now, the major reason that a student will not graduate on time is because they're not revising their mentor's work on time. So please be aware of that. Alright, if you're not going down the thesis route, then everything is the same. You have to submit a prospectus, only that you're not dependent on the defense committee. You are dependent on your research mentor and me. If I see something that I don't like in the prospectus, if I think that it's not good enough, as program director, I can intervene and make sure that this is taken care of. And of course, the IRB committee can always demand changes. or not approve the idea. At the end of the process, there's no defense. It is sent out to two faculty members at the University of Mary. Usually it's Dr. Jill Newstead, the department chair, and me. And there's your research mentor. The research mentor evaluates the process and the outcome, and the other two evaluators evaluate the outcome only. The grade that you get is the average of what was given to you by your evaluators. Alright, so we went over that. I want to make sure that you understand that the amount of subjects that you're going to have to have is exactly the same in thesis and research projects, so that is a minimum of 30. No matter how many groups you have in your research project, you're going to have one group that is clinical. And according to the design, the total amount of subjects that must complete, not start the study, complete the study, that you actually have complete data about them, has to be at least 30. You want to check the 130 and you think you can do it on time? Go ahead. Alright. Okay. Alright. Take in consideration when you're asking someone that is external to be your research mentor, they might, force you to go to a certain way and do things certain ways. On the upside, you're networking, you have more connections, you're connecting to another professional in the field besides us, you have more angles and more experience. On the downside, you might be limited by those people, and we might be limited as well. I want to talk about the data collection supervisor. You're not doing something, alone. When you're collecting data, you need to be supervised. It can be your research mentor, or it can be someone else. That person has to have at least a master's degree and experience in research. And they have to understand what you're doing. They have to be able to say, hey, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. So if you can find a research mentor, if we're talking about someone external that can also supervise data collection, that's great. If not, you're going to have to find someone additional. For instance, if you want me to be your research mentor, but you want to conduct a research in Minnesota, I'm not in Minnesota. Surprise! So you're going to have to find a research data collecting supervisor. Alright? It sounds way more complicated than it actually is. The idea is that you're not with subjects on your own, and you have actual guidance. We do not pay these people, so they have to be willing to do it for free and contribute from their time. They will be added to any article that is published, and they'll be mentioned in your work, of course. And they have tons of gratitude from you. Let's see. Obviously, you do not do anything without your mentor knowing about it, and your mentor is supposed to make sure that if you're on a thesis path, that your committee knows about everything as well. Obviously, you need to start finding a research mentor and a data collecting supervisor. If it happens to be the same person, then you've saved time, and you want to do that as fast as possible. I'll only tell you that, if you're going to address someone that is external, that's completely fine. We love that as well. But you better think about ideas before, And I suggest that you know who you're addressing. You want to read their CV, you want to see what their lab offers, what's your opportunities. You want to meet with them, you need to impress them. You're kind of interviewing in a way. Just make sure that you know what you're doing so you don't miss an opportunity to have that person agree. And when I mentor people, or I was asked to mentor in the past from other universities, I made sure that this person is not going to waste my time. It's a lot of work. I'm not sure you have any idea how much work it is to mentor a student. And while I see it as a privilege and an honor, wow, it's tons of work, tons of work. So be respectful of that and be mindful of that. If you have any more questions or you want any more tips, just let me know. Let's see, we talked about the committee chairperson, the committee members. I'm not going over every point in the presentation. We've talked about the data collection supervisor. All right, let's talk about finding your topic of research. This is on slide 25. It's important to really connect to the field, understand what's out there, what's interesting today, what's known, what's not known, and come up with a question that right now we do not have an answer in the world. Or you can challenge existing knowledge, which is not easy. You're going to have to know what you're doing, and you have to have a logical bit. It's not just saying, hey, I think the heart is on the right. Why not check? No, obviously the heart is on the left. But if you have some kind of theory that you want to challenge, which is something, by the way, that I've done in my PhD, and you think you can prove it, that's an interesting path. Otherwise, you want to shed some light on the world. With that said, don't get into trouble. I try and keep your designs and topics as simple as possible, as cheap as possible, because you guys and ladies are paying all the expenses. So don't try and save the world. Don't send me a design that you're going to have 1,000 subjects and you're going to check 6 biomarkers in 6 different countries in the world. That's not going to happen. I mean, if you insist, but I don't think that's a good idea. All right, let's see what else. Once again, an external professor or mentor might tell you, my lab deals with this. These are the 2 topics that I'm interested in. You want to tap in? Cool. Not interested. Okay, reasons not to approve a topic and design. And I'll send you a list. I'll upload a list just to get you started, with ideas. You're not confined to that list, just kind of, brain food a bit. Any ethical problems with your topic or design, obviously not going to be approved. They'll also not be approved by the IRB. Any high costs, crazy costs, unless you really insist on paying them and you can prove that you have the money, not going to be approved. If you're going somewhere that I don't think you have the abilities to do that, there's no point in seeing a wall and accelerating. Lack of resources, which is an important analysis to do it first when you have a design and a topic. Okay, what do I need? I need an ELISA machine. Do you have an ELISA machine? Are you able to tap into someone's else's lab, biology lab or biogenetics lab, and use the machine? Will they let you? What is needed in order for them to let you do that? Do you need another IRB submitted at that institute? Do you need insurance? What? Well, you need to make sure that the resources don't only exist, but they're also available to you. If the design is too complicated, it might take you too much time, and then it won't be approved. If you insist, and I had students insist on bad ideas, I mean, they were good, sorry, I'll rephrase. They weren't bad in how they presented or in the quality or the idea. It was just obvious that they're not going to graduate within 2 years. If you're okay with that, I'll have you sign a document that you understand, that you insist that this be your research, and that you're not graduating within 5 terms, maybe even in 8 terms. If you are okay with that, all right. You know, I do want researchers to be passionate about what they're doing, and it's an important thing that, you know, if you're not passionate, you're gonna encounter what we call the aggravation of research, and that you have to be passionate about what you're doing. All right, we've spoken about what your design has to include. You can have more than one research question. I encourage you to have as much variables as possible without getting into trouble. Let's talk about the sample size. That would be on slide number 31. So you can see there's a table here, and no matter what you do, you're going to have at the end at least 30 subjects. So if you have one group, that group has to be clinical. Clinical meaning metabolic disease, cardiac, pulmonary, cardiovascular, renal, mental, you name it. But it has to be a clinical population, and you have to have 30 subjects. This case, you can have the same subjects, for instance, in 2 different conditions. You can check their information when they're not working out, for instance, and then you can have the same subjects working out in the second half of the research, or you can compare the same subjects in 2 different protocols, for instance. Right? So you only need one group, but they have to be clinical. If you have 2 groups, then every group should have at least 15 people in them, and one of the 2 groups has to be clinical. The other does not have to be necessarily clinical, but can be. If you have 3 groups, every group will have at least 10 people. One of the groups has to be clinical. Very simple. It adds up to 30 people at the end, at least. You know, you have a research question, and then you're asked in the hypotheses to say, what do you think you're going to find? Obviously, you need to, you know, this needs to be part of your passion, and, you know, that that motivation to find the answer. You have to be curious about the answer. What am I going to find? Now, by saying what you think you're going to find, you know, there's no lawyers here, so you might be actually wrong. You might be surprised. But you're saying, hey, this is a question that we have. This is what we think we're going to find. That's the hypothesis. And then the rest of the work is either accepting the hypothesis or rejecting it. If you're rejecting it, it means that you found something different of what you thought. So yeah, when you're answering, you're not just saying, I think I'm right. No, you need to say, okay, I think men's values will be lower or higher than women, and even give a reason, a mechanism. We think that it's because of this and that, and as much information as you can as to what you expect and why. All right. Obviously, when your prospectus is submitted, then we either reject the idea or not. If not, the prospectus is authorized either by the committee or me, and obviously your research mentor. If I'm your research mentor, obviously you have less people to deal with, but I definitely encourage you to think about others. It doesn't have to be me. And we start the process. We start writing the prospectus, having it approved. Once it's approved, IRB proposal, and then once the IRB is approved, data collection. All right, the IRB committee, and this is important for you to understand, has one thing to make. Well, it's more than one thing, but it's kind of the same. The bottom line is to make sure that the research is conducted for a good reason and that the subjects are not harmed. You have to understand this. They are on the side that defends the subjects. You need to convince the IRB that this study is important and that there is a good reason that you are asking to do whatever the protocol includes to these subjects. If you cannot convince the IRB committee of these two questions first, you're not even going to start the process. And they might challenge you. Why is this important? The IRB committee does not include people from our department at this time, currently. So they might not understand basic things, and you're going to have to be patient and indulge them and answer the questions. They might have numerous remarks that can originate from curiosity or advice, or remarks that this will not be approved until you change this and that. You are allowed to challenge any of the remarks of the committee, but at the end of the day, they might not approve, and you might have to make changes even if you don't like them. And we'll guide you through a successful IRB proposal. I will guide you guys and ladies. And you're just going to have to go back and forth. It might take up to 2 weeks, even a month, for them to revise your work. So that's why we want to make everything happen really fast and accurate and think about everything. And we do have our experience here with the IRB committee, and it's a good experience. There are 4 parts that you'll be acquainted to in due time. And we'll give you plenty of examples and examples of remarks that come back from the IRB, and hopefully you'll know that before you. It's not hopefully, you're definitely gonna know about all those tips and things that come up with the IRB before you start writing your IRB. Okay. So we talked about that. If your IRB is approved, it's approved for a year, and we immediately start data collection and chapter writing. When the IRB is approved, you immediately start data collection and chapter writing. You are writing all the chapters that are not dependent on the results, meaning the introduction, meaning the lit review, meaning the methods and procedures, the abstract. You start making the title page and the acknowledgments and your resume and so on and so forth. Okay, and the appendixes. And once you have data collection concluded, then you start writing all the other chapters, meaning the results and discussion. Alright, we spoke about this. Changes. Let's say that you need to make changes. The major change, everything has to be reported to the IRB just to make sure of that, but the major change that might set you back in time is a change to the protocol. If you're going to change the subjects, if you're going to change what you're doing to them, a new proposal, it's the same proposal with that change, must be sent again to the committee and has to be approved again. So we want to think of everything in advance. If you're adding a researcher, not a biggie, it ends with an email. If you're adding a data collection site, not a big issue, it ends with an email. Sample size probably ends with an email. So just so you know. One of the major time consumers is if you need an IRB for another institute. Thus, if you know you're going to collect data outside of the University of Mary, you have to, in parallel, take care of that, and don't waste a second. Okay. Just remember that that institute has something other than your research to take care of on a daily basis, and you need to make sure how long it's going to take and take that into consideration. Enrollment. When we're submitting our IRB proposal, you have to submit your enrollment materials. The committee has to approve everything you use, everything that a candidate subject will see and receive has to be approved by the committee. Okay? Obviously, it has to be respectful. It has to represent exactly what's going to happen. It cannot contradict a proposal. So you might want to think about that. Let's talk about the research map. I'm telling you right here, right now, the worst thing that you can do is not have a plan. And I'm not just saying, okay, I have 2 groups with 15 subjects. We're going to develop what we call a research map, where you're going to write every title and every subtitle and the major points that you're going to discuss in it. For instance, if you are researching the influence of a 6% slope on a TM versus an 8% slope on a TM in adolescent males versus females, then you have to explain to me what is the introduction going to include, what is the lit review going to include, what is the methods and procedures going to include, results, analysis of the results, and the discussion. For instance, in the discussion, you're gonna tell me that you're going to discuss the physiological characteristics of adolescence. You're going to discuss gender/sex related differences pertaining to adolescence. You're going to explain the influence of slope on some kind of variable on VO2, oxygen consumption and uptake in adolescence, and so on and so forth. So you and then this thesis map or this research map makes sure that you don't get lost. That's the idea of a map. The map says you are here, and this is where you need to go, and this is where you came from. I'm telling you, you're not advancing until you're research map is perfect. And it takes time to create a research map, but it saves 3 to 5 times as much working with a thesis map or a research map rather than not. Students just get lost. They submit their work, they get it revised a week, sometimes 2 weeks after, with remarks which they could have prevented. So remember that. And it can be the difference between graduating on time or not. Remember that. Alright, let's see. Subject enrollment or rejection. Once everything is approved, you're starting to enroll people. The first and most important legal aspect of your work is having them sign the informed consent form, which is also authorized by the IRB and me and your research mentor. Only after they've signed that, meaning that they've read it and understood it. You need to make sure that your subjects understand English, that they understand the terms. You are not to try and persuade them to just sign. That's not how it goes. You need them to understand. The purpose of the informed consent form is that no one can come afterwards and say, hey, I didn't know they're going to do this. I didn't understand. This is what's going on. For 2 reasons. A, legal issues. B, you don't want them leaving the research, the study in the middle, right? You want to retain every subject, so you need to do a good job on this, believe me. After they've signed the informed consent, then they fill out a health history questionnaire, which helps you see if they are going to be included or excluded from the study according to their risk stratification and the inclusion and exclusion criteria that you have defined for this research, right? If they have a cardiac problem, condition, and you decided that you don't want someone with a cardiac condition in your study, then you're going to exclude them. Once they're included, then you set data collection sessions according to your protocol. It can be the same day, it can be a week after, whatever. Okay, let's see. Talk about all this, just going through that. Obviously, risk stratification will be taught by Jill, and practice in lab week. And we're working with the guidelines of the American College of Sports Medicine, the ACSM, which you will be very well acquainted with, if not already. Okay, let's see. Alright, data collection. You'll schedule data collection. I expect you to be in constant communications with the subjects. They forget. You're not a top priority for them. Some are disoriented, unorganized. You want to call them 2 days before the session and remind them, do you remember that the day after tomorrow we're meeting at 9? Yeah. Do you remember to bring sports apparel? Yeah. Sportswear. Sports shoes? Yes. Do you remember not to consume caffeine 8 hours prior? Do you remember to have 8 hours of sleep? Yeah. Do you remember, not to exercise? You need to remind them. And then the day after, and then you tell them, I'm going to call tomorrow too, just to remind you, okay? Yeah, or text you or send you an email. All right. I need you to fill out your self-report. bring it in with you, please, or send it to me by email. All right, and then you go over it, and then you collect data. Immediately after, if you believe that your protocol may produce problems, you want to retain them. You also have to care about them, that everything's okay, and you call them. Are you okay? Is everything okay? Do you need any help? Any concerns? Something like that. All right. It's really, really important, and it makes a difference. All right. If we're talking about if you have samples that include tissue, cells, DNA, you definitely have to save those samples in a safe place. Once you're done with the research or using them, for instance, you've collected blood and you extracted serum from the blood and you analyzed it for a biomarker, and now you don't want to keep the serum anymore. You need the IRB committee's approval. You might write that in the proposal, and once the proposal is approved, you don't have to ask for that permission, but you do need the permission from the subject. So if you write that in the informed consent and they signed, then you don't have to ask for their permission. Obviously, you have to dispose of it in an appropriate way and make sure that the samples are completely destroyed and no one can use those samples. You can also give your subjects the possibility of getting back their samples and do whatever they want with it. We'll talk a bit more about the chapters as we go. I'll have you read these regarding chapters because we still have time with that, and I'd rather talk to you during lab week and make sure in person that you understand this. So I'm gonna skip over the written chapters. And I'll stop the video here because I think it has a limit of an hour, and then I'll upload a sequel regarding professional distinction. Hang in there.